So before we get going, just a note about Wales. So most of this e-lesson is going to be about property licensing that was brought in under the Housing Act 2004. But I wanted you to be aware of the fact that there is now an extra layer of licensing which they've brought in Wales. So in Wales, as well as the requirements from the Housing Act 2004 around the licensing of certain types of rental properties, Wales has decided to bring in a blanket approach for registration and licensing, where all landlords and all property managers, including letting agents, have to either get themselves registered or get themselves licensed with one central licensing body called Rent Smart Wales. This is based in Cardiff and covers the whole of Wales and shares its enforcement duties with local authorities. The reason they brought this in was because the local authorities didn't hold the best of records around the rental housing sector. They didn't even know how many rental houses they had or where they were. I should add, when I use the term houses, I also mean flats and any other form of dwelling. And nationally, they didn't have much in a way of records of this either, and it was very poor communication channels in order to send out information about the plentiful changes around the legislation and guidance for those in charge of rental accommodation. So they brought in the Housing Wales Act 2014, and this introduced Rent Smart Wales and made it a requirement for every single person who owned a rental property in Wales to register with Rent Smart Wales. So that's any residential property. The reason for this registration was, first of all, to discover where on earth all of their rental housing was, as they didn't know. They didn't even know how much of it they had. And then the registration lasted for 5 years, and landlords could agree for Rent Smart Wales to contact them with guidance and information about training opportunities that were going on in their area, information around the latest changes to legislation and guidance, things that they might want to know about changes to tax for rental housing, all sorts of stuff. And most landlords chose to opt into the email list for that, and so they get regular newsletters from Rent Smart Wales with the latest of what's going on in the sector. So Rent Smart Wales registers these landlords every 5 years. They pay a tiny fee, around less than £100 or around £100, and they go through the registration. There's a very light touch approach, quite it's a formality. For those that are actually involved in the management of the rental property, so the letting agents and the landlords who manage their own housing, they are required to go a step further. They've got to show that they are fit and proper people, so they don't have criminal offences of relevant nature which might make them unsuitable to run rental properties. They also have to pay a small fee to process a licence, which is a bit over £100 usually, and they've got to undergo what at the moment is just a single day's training from any one of a range of recognised providers who've registered with Rent Smart Wales. So they then have to get a licence. Once they've got this licence, Rent Smart Wales puts a whole range of conditions in the licence which cover how they go about doing business. And so that includes things like registering with a client money protection scheme, which acts as a kind of insurance. So periodically, a letting agent will close up business and put all of the landlords and tenants' money into their own bank account and then run away with it. And so this repays the landlords. The landlords who've invested in the letting agent and the tenants who've given them their deposit money and rental money, and so that neither are out of pocket. Other things that might include are in licences. It's a sort of standard set of conditions are things like visiting the property annually for singly occupied properties and every 6 months for HMO properties. Other things might include getting the deposits protected with schemes and things like that. So sorts of things you'd expect from good practice. So if they don't get a license, or if they're very naughty and people complain to the Rent Smart Wales or the council too much about them, Rent Smart Wales have the opportunity to rescind that license. If they rescind that license, then that puts that individual or company out of business, because they can no longer rent out properties in Wales. They all have to be managed by somebody else. And so it means that if you're going to choose to be a poor operator, then they can kick you out of the industry completely. For those that try to avoid the scheme and operate under the radar, failure to register or license their property is punishable by a fixed penalty notice, which if they continue to flout the rules, they can follow up with a fine in a magistrate's court. So at the moment they've got a very graded approach to enforcement, with a lot of advice and guidance being provided via the website and via a big call centre that they've got and a big computer system for letting agents and landlords and anyone working in property management. But that's about as much as I want you to think about that now, because the rest of this C lesson is going to be focused on the licensing of properties. So Rent Smart Wales do licensing of landlords and registration of landlords, and the rest of this lesson is going to be looking at licensing of property, which is used across England and Wales and comes under an earlier piece of legislation called the Housing Act 2004.